All right, let's jump right in to our deep dive into the book of Ruth, chapter 4. We're going to be unpacking a story of land redemption, family loyalty, and a surprising twist that leads to a very famous name you've probably heard of.
You know, this is one of those chapters that really shows us how personal stories and ancient customs all kind of weave together. It's a fascinating glimpse into what life was really like back then.
So we're in ancient Israel. Customs and laws were a huge part of everyday life. And we're introduced to Boaz, a wealthy landowner. Now, Boaz is interested in Ruth, a widowed Moabite woman. He's about to become a kinsman redeemer. But what does that even mean?
The kinsman redeemer, it was a really important role in their society. Think of it this way. It was like a relative who had this duty to protect the family line. So if a family was struggling, maybe they lost their land, the kinsman redeemer could step in and buy it back. It was all about restoring their security and their place in the community.
So it wasn't just about the property itself. It was more about preserving the family legacy.
Exactly. It was about making sure the family name continued, their inheritance wouldn't be lost, and that their connection to their ancestors stayed strong.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how does all of this play out in the story of Boaz and Ruth?
Okay, so we've got Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, who's come back to Bethlehem. She's lost her husband and her sons. So she and Ruth, they're in a tough spot both socially and economically. And according to their laws, a close relative, someone like Boaz, had the option, actually even the duty, to step in and redeem the family's land.
I can see where this is going. This is going to be good.
Oh, yeah, it gets interesting. So Boaz calls a public meeting at the city gate. You can picture it. Everyone's gathered around. The town elders are there as witnesses. And he calls out to another relative, actually someone even closer to Naomi, to see if he'll redeem the land.
So it's like a public auction, but a family legacy is on the line. So what happens next? Does this other relative jump at the chance?
Well, first it seems like he's totally ready to do his duty. But then Boaz throws in a twist. Redeeming the land also means he has to marry Ruth, the Moabite widow.
Oh, I see where this is going. Marrying a foreigner probably wasn't the most popular choice back then.
Exactly. It could be seen as risky, maybe diluting the family line. And remember, in those days, land was everything. It was your source of income, your status, your connection to your ancestors. This relative had to weigh the responsibility of redeeming the land against the potential consequences for his own inheritance.
So what did he decide? Did he go ahead with the redemption?
You can almost feel the tension. Everyone's waiting for his answer. And in the end, he backs out. He says he can't risk his own inheritance by marrying Ruth.
Oh, man. That must have been such a relief for Boaz.
Yeah.
Talk about an open door. He gets to step right into the role of redeemer.
It's a turning point for sure. And now things get even more interesting. Because to make this deal official, they use one of the most unique customs you'll find in the Bible. The sandal ceremony.
A sandal? Really? I've got to hear more about this.
I know it sounds strange to us today, but back then it was a big deal. Taking off your sandal and handing it to someone was like signing a contract. It was a legally binding way to finalize a transaction.
So the relative takes off his sandal, gives it to Boaz, and just like that, Boaz becomes the redeemer.
That's it. And remember, this is all happening in front of the elders, the community leaders. It's a public declaration. It's a reminder of how important public acknowledgement and communal agreement were in those days.
That's amazing how something so simple could carry so much weight. It reminds me of those historical dramas where they seal a deal with a handshake or some special object. Were there other customs like that in ancient Israel?
Well, even today we still shake hands. It shows agreement and trust that a deal's been made. In some cultures, breaking bread together has a similar meaning. It's about creating a bond, a shared experience. That's what the sandal ceremony was for the Israelites. A physical act that represented a real agreement, both legally and socially.
I see what you mean. It's like those rituals were built into their society. They added another layer of meaning to everything they did. Yep. So after the sandal exchange, what happens next? Does Boaz sweep Ruth off her feet and they ride off into the sunset?
Well, not exactly, but there is a celebration. The witnesses, they shower Boaz and Ruth with blessings. They even compare Ruth to some of the great women from their history, like Rachel and Leah. Women who are known for building strong families.
It's like the whole community's cheering them on. They're hoping they'll build a family and carry on the legacy. This is only the beginning of their story, right? What happens next?
Oh, there's so much more to come. But I think we'll have to save that for our next segment.
All right, listeners, stay tuned. We'll be right back to dive deeper into the story of Boaz and Ruth. Welcome back to our deep dive into the book of Ruth. Before the break, we saw Boaz officially becoming the redeemer. After that sandal ceremony, pretty amazing stuff. Now he's going to marry Ruth, but what makes a guy do that? I mean, it can't just be about the land, right?
You're right, there's definitely something deeper going on here. Throughout the whole chapter, Boaz shows incredible generosity and compassion. Think about it from the beginning when he first sees Ruth gleaning in his fields. He makes sure she's cared for. He goes above and beyond.
Yeah, he tells his workers to leave extra grain and to treat her with respect.
Yeah.
It would have been so easy to just ignore her. She's a foreigner, a widow. In those days, people could easily just overlook someone like that. But Boaz chooses to see her, to protect her, and ultimately to love her. What do you think that says about him, especially in that society?
It's pretty remarkable, right? He challenges the social norms of the time. He doesn't just see her circumstances, he sees her worth as a person. And it's not just Ruth either. He's incredibly respectful toward Naomi. He sees her loss and vulnerability. He could have just focused on the land. But he goes out of his way to make sure Naomi's taken care of as well.
That's a good point. It really shows his character. He's not just following the rules. He's doing what's right, even when it's hard.
Absolutely, and that integrity really shines through the whole story. It's like the author is holding Boaz up as an example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a model for how people should act. And this idea of being a good example, it connects to something else. The book places a lot of emphasis on Boaz's lineage. There's this detailed genealogy tracing his ancestry all the way back to Perez. Perez was the son of Judah. It's like the writer's saying, hey, pay attention to this family tree. This matters.
That's right. They really highlight Boaz's roots. What's the significance of that for us today? Why should we care about this guy's family tree?
Well, it shows us that Boaz isn't just some random dude. He's part of a long line of important people. And what he does, his choices, they all add to that legacy. And of course, the big reveal of that genealogy is the connection to King David.
Yes. The shepherd boy who became king. Talk
Yeah.
about a famous ancestor. It's incredible to think that this little story in the book of Ruth is the foundation for one of the most important kings in the Bible.
It's like a secret origin story, right? It gives us a whole new perspective on David's family history. We see how important things like family loyalty and kindness are. And those are themes that pop up again and again in David's own life and his time as king.
Speaking of loyalty, let's not forget about the amazing women in this story. Naomi might have lost her husband and sons, but she's still a powerful figure. She guides Ruth, encourages her, and helps to bring about this whole incredible situation. What do you think her role tells us about women in that society?
It's easy to miss how strong Naomi is. She's grieving and vulnerable, yes. But she's also incredibly resilient and smart. She uses her wisdom and her knowledge of customs to advocate for Ruth, to give her a better future. It challenges that idea that women had no power in that society. Naomi shows us that women could be influential, that they could play a key role in shaping their family's destiny.
And then there's Ruth herself, a Moabite, a foreigner, and she's the one who becomes part of this incredible lineage, this pivotal moment in history. It speaks volumes about her character.
Definitely. Her loyalty to Naomi is remarkable. She could have stayed in Moab, gotten remarried there, but she chooses to go with Naomi to Bethlehem, to embrace this new land, this new family. And in the end, her faithfulness, her hard work, they're rewarded. It's like a reminder that what we do has an impact. And sometimes that impact is bigger than we can imagine.
And that brings us to something really important in the story. The text says that the Lord enabled her to conceive. It's a small detail, but what does it mean for us?
It's powerful, isn't it? It's a reminder that even in the middle of all these human choices and actions, there's a divine hand at work, guiding events toward a bigger purpose. It suggests that there's a plan unfolding something greater than the characters can understand.
Like some unseen force is bringing their lives together, making things happen to create something good, even if the characters don't realize it at the time. But they're not alone in this. The text talks about how the community reacts to the birth of Obed.
Oh, it's such a sweet moment. The women, they celebrate this baby. They say, a son has been born to Naomi. They remember Naomi's loss. But they also affirm that this new life brings hope and a sense of continuation. It's beautiful. It's communal support at its finest.
It's like they're saying, this is your grandson, Naomi, your family goes on.
Yeah.
And they name the baby Obed, which means servant. It's almost like a hint at the future role of this family line. A line that will serve the nation of Israel through King David.
Exactly. That's what's so cool about this story.
It's full of these tiny details.
Yeah.
A name, a blessing, a sandal.
And they all add to the bigger picture.
They weave together this rich tapestry of meaning and purpose.
Right. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
What moments in our own lives might be part of something bigger?
Yeah, what kind of legacies are we building?
And ripples are we sending out into the world?
Those are good questions to think about. It reminds us that even the ordinary things in life can be full of meaning and purpose. It makes us want to look for those connections, those threads that link our lives to something greater.
This has been amazing. We've got kindness and loyalty and a sandal ceremony and a baby who's going to be the grandfather of King David. Is there anything else to discover in this story?
There's always more to find, especially with a book as rich and complex as Ruth.
We'll be right back to explore those complexities. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to our deep dive into Ruth chapter 4. It's amazing how this story connects a simple act of land redemption to the lineage of King David.
Right, talk about an impressive family tree.
We've been talking about Boaz's kindness and Ruth's loyalty, but their story doesn't just end with the birth of Obed, so what happens next? How does their legacy continue to impact history?
Well, Obed, he becomes the father of Jesse, and then Jesse becomes the father of King David. In David's reign, it was a huge turning point for the Israelites. He brought the tribes together, made Jerusalem the capital, and led them into a golden age.
Yeah, he's the warrior king, the poet, the musician, the one who took down Goliath. David's a legend. But what's so interesting is that his story, his whole legacy, is rooted in this story of Boaz and Ruth.
Exactly. And it goes even further than that. It's through David's line that the Messiah Jesus eventually comes. So in a way, the story of Boaz and Ruth, it's part of this much bigger story, a story of redemption and hope that touches all of humanity.
That is incredible. It's mind-blowing to think that this story of love and loyalty in a small village is woven into the fabric of salvation history. It makes you wonder what seemingly small moments in our own lives might actually be part of a much bigger story.
That's the power of these ancient texts, that they don't just shed light on the past. They make us think about our own lives, our choices, our place in the grand scheme of things.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Ruth chapter 4, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from this story?
I think the biggest takeaway is the lasting power of kindness. Boaz's actions show us that even small acts of generosity can have a huge impact. He was willing to see Ruth, to protect her, to love her, and that set off a chain of events that ultimately shaped the destiny of a nation and beyond.
It's a beautiful reminder that kindness isn't just a feeling. It's a force that can shape destinies, change history, and leave a legacy that lasts for generations.
And if we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, it reminds us that we're all connected. What we do matters, our actions have consequences, and even ordinary lives can become part of an extraordinary story.
That's so true. Well, listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this journey back to ancient Israel with us. We've explored ancient customs, watched a love story unfold, and uncovered a genealogical twist. A twist that connects this seemingly ordinary tale to one of the most significant figures in history.
And remember, this is just the beginning. The book of Ruth is full of wisdom and insight. I encourage you to keep exploring this amazing story, discover its hidden layers, and see how its themes of loyalty, redemption, and unexpected grace resonate in your own life.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time as we explore another fascinating corner of history, culture, and the human experience.